Here's another problem or one of the key processes that can become problematic that happens. Selective perception. Or sometimes it's called motivated cognition. So when we try to make sense of the world, we mentioned this before, we don't perceive the world as it is objectively. We perceive so the world, if there's an objective world out there, which I tend to believe, I stated that earlier, we have some perceptions that come to us, but the filter intervenes there. We're not fully aware of the filter. So what comes as an image, a built image in our brain of the situation, is a mix of the objective reality and your own subjectivity, right? So this is sort of like what happens. So we start with here, objective reality. You might think of it as recording reality with your senses, like a videotape might, right? And we talked about this. We only select certain aspect of that. So there's already a selection operating, and that selection is bias. You could call it bias, but you could also call it intelligent selection. So bias and intelligent selection are kind of one and the same thing, you know, the two sides of the same coin. Then you add meanings, cultural and personal, based on your filters to that. You make assumptions. You have to fill up some blanks. Once you start to see a picture emerge, you have to ask yourself, well, how do these different things fit together? So we usually always make educated guesses, assumptions about, you know, those blanks, those things that we cannot observe. Some of those things are people's motives, for example. If we're not sure how to read somebody's emotional reaction, we might make some guesses about what that display means. Like a great example is smiling. If somebody's smiling, what does it mean? Right? So it could mean that they're happy. It could mean that they're amused. It could mean that they are embarrassed. It could mean that they are uncomfortable. It could mean a lot of things. But based on our cultural, that's particularly cultural, right? The smile varies a lot in different cultures. Like, for example, in Asian cultures, smiling often is a sign of embarrassment, as opposed to a sign of happiness and everything's cool, right? So we add assumptions and add meanings. We draw conclusions. And then we believe, most of us are wired to believe that we are objective and correct. We tend to believe that our worldview is not just a worldview, that is the world, that is reality, that is objective reality. We don't tend to think about our subjectivity very much. So then we draw conclusions that we believe are the truth, are completely valid, right? And then we act on those beliefs, on those conclusions, and our actions reify reality. So this is not a problem. This is just the way we function. But where it becomes a problem is when we have what we call self-fulfilling prophecies, or it's called sometimes the Pygmalion effect. They can be positive or negative, by the way. The placebo effect is a great example of that. How many of you have heard of the placebo effect? What's the placebo effect? Yes?
It's when, so an example would be like if you're doing a drug study,
Mm-hmm.
they would give like one group
Mm-hmm.
like a placebo pill,
Right.
nothing with the drug,
Uh-huh.
and they wouldn't know they weren't getting the right thing.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people can like think that it's actually working.
Yeah. And usually it's a sugar pill, right? It's a piece of sugar. So if you believe that you're given a medication that will help you, that belief itself will actually make a positive difference, right? You know, it's kind of like children learn the story of if you believe you can, then you can, right? But that's true in reality. So if we have positive beliefs about the world, that tends to become what you experience. If you have negative beliefs about the world, that tends to be what you experience. So, we have certain beliefs that influence our actions, which then has an influence on how other people or even the world responds to us, right? Which tends to reinforce our beliefs. So here's there's kind of an example here used of how this ladder of inference, which is really related to the self-fulfilling prophecy thing. So imagine that a boss has an employee working for them, Rashmi in this case, who misses a deadline for an assignment, and she gives no apology or explanation and goes on sick leave, right? So that's the observable experience. From there, that could mean a whole host of things. She could really actually be sick and be missing the assignment for that reason. But in this case, the boss says, start to select some data from that. Starts to connect the fact that, she missed a deadline, and then immediately after, she took a sick leave. Adds a meaning to it. I believe that probably she was faking the illness, and she was not interested in the assignments. That's all interpretation, right? I make additional assumptions. She's not interested. I make an assumption about her personality now and her character. She's irresponsible. She doesn't want additional responsibilities. So the conclusions that I'm going to draw and the actions I'm going to take is I'm going to stop trusting her, and I'm going to stop giving her additional responsibilities. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if I avoid her, don't trust her, don't give her more responsibilities, she's going to respond in a despondent way. She's not going to be actually taking more responsibilities, most likely. And then I'm going to confirm my belief, I was right. She was faking the illness. She's not interested in personality. Now I've made a whole set of assumptions that she's a bad person, and I've damaged a relationship, right? And it's very hard for me to question that train of thoughts and that set of beliefs once I've set it in motion. Now, this is again, most of the time, the ladder of inference doesn't have to be lead you to wrong conclusions. We have to make educated guesses about the world. We have to simplify it, and hopefully, most often, we're correct. We're somewhat correct. We're not completely incorrect. But what this is emphasizing is that sometimes it leads us to make really incorrect judgments. And it's very important it's very useful to observe your own ladder of inference. I'm going to invite you to do that from now until next Monday. If you can be an observer of yourself, divide your attention to go through your everyday life, but then take note of how does the ladder of inference work for me? When I meet new people or when I interact with people that I already know, how does that work? What's the observable data? What is the data I selected? What meanings have I added? And so on and so forth. You might think about things you've done in the past when you've had the wrong impression about somebody, right? And revisit the tape and say, what happened there? Obviously, when we are the victim of that, we are much more likely to observe it than when we are engaging in it ourselves. So that's why I think it's key to learn it's more important to learn how to observe how it works in yourself than how it works in others. I'd like to point to the positive dimension of self-fulfilling prophecies, which, the placebo effect is an example of that. So if I have a fundamental disposition to believe that people are trustworthy and well-intentioned, and that they're going to help me, they're going to not hurt me, not going to attack me, right? In fact, going to help me. And I engage most new people that I meet with that disposition, with that belief, right? Then people are most likely going to respond to me in a way that's trustworthy. And my life will be a life where most of the people that I encounter are my friends, are helping me, and that's usually a pretty positive outcome. It's positive for me. It allows me to develop a pretty helpful community of people around me. Now, some of us who are less trusting will say, well, but you really, you expose yourself to being taken advantage of and all that, and that's true. Right? There's you need to have a little bit more flexibility than that. But now, if you have the opposite set of beliefs, if you tend to believe that most people are out to get you, then you shouldn't trust anybody, then also people will respond they will behave, they will seem to behave in response to your distrust in the same way. Maybe, again, think about different people you know, different belief systems that they have, and how they get different results when they interact with others, and how it's related to that.